Her children are ever part of her. Flavor text of Sliver Queen. Survival of the fittest could be said to be the one absolute rule of nature. Across the multiverse, whether by natural or magical means, all sorts of creatures have evolved and adapted to best survive in their environment. Some beasts become massive over time, growing so mighty that few, if any, dare to threaten them. Others become fast, evasive, difficult to capture or kill, while others still become crafty, using their wits to outmaneuver potential threats. But slivers are not just mighty. Slivers are not merely fast. Slivers are not simply crafty. Slivers are a force unlike any other. They are a tide. They are the swarm. And together, they are unstoppable. While there is a great degree of variation in individual specimens, the vast majority of slivers resemble a sort of serpent or worm. Their heads are long, bony structures without visible eyes or mouths that rest upon muscular shoulders. Their single, sickle-like arm grows from the center of their chest, a deadly weapon on its own, and their long, elegant bodies end in a forked, tentacle-like tail. Variations in their physiology can result in slivers being fleshy or scaled, or even some with a crystalline covering on their body. Finally, on the distant world of Chandalar, slivers have evolved into two distinct breeds. While normal slivers are still present and abundant, Chandalar is also home to a strain that has evolved into a more humanoid appearance, featuring 2 arms, 2 legs, as well as tentacled hair of sorts upon their head. Though how this new form came to be is unknown, it's possible that the slivers adopted this appearance in mimicry of the local humans on this world. Slivers typically live together in massive hive communities, which they call skeps in their tongue. Here, various tasks are distributed among the many slivers that live within, a hub of activity with the greatest sliver, their leader, at the center of it all. But the most interesting aspect about the slivers is not their physical appearance or their hives. It is their natural shape-shifting abilities, combined with the might of the hive mind. Slivers are an exceptionally adaptive species, with individual members undergoing changes to match their environment. All slivers possess natural evolutionary abilities, with specimens changing in response to external stimuli. When exposed to new environments, creatures, or threats, any single sliver is able to adapt, changing their own body to help with whatever new situation they're exposed to. Slivers can sharpen their claws into blades, or greatly extend their reach or speed, and even gain the ability to fly or fire projectile spines from their bodies, depending on what they encounter. Not only do these slivers learn and adapt and evolve, they share this evolution with other, nearby slivers. This species is perhaps one of the few in the multiverse to possess a true hive mind, with slivers sharing knowledge and experience with nearby members of their race. As a result, if one sliver learns how to fly, all other nearby slivers will also know how to fly. If one figures out how to spit acid, so too do its allies. These changes happen almost immediately, with Slivers shifting in appearance swiftly mid-combat to use new abilities as more members of the swarm arrive. It is thanks to this adaptive, evolutionary hive mind that Slivers in a group are one of the most dangerous things one could encounter in the multiverse. This hive mind does not simply allow Slivers to share their abilities with one another. It provides them with direction and purpose. At the center of whatever skep the Slivers call home will be the single greatest member of their species, a single mighty Sliver controlling all others. In the Furnace of Wrath, this was the Sliver Queen, whereas the Hive Lord rules the skep on Chandalar. The further a Sliver is from the center of their hive, the weaker the Queen's control over it will be. In the same way, the further a Sliver is from other members of its species as a whole, the fewer abilities it will have. As a result, the best way to combat a group of Slivers is to split them up, weakening them and picking them off one by one. This, of course, is easier said than done, and more often than not, survival against the Slivers will involve fleeing or appeasement. Once the swarm has reached a certain size, no amount of force or tactics will avail you. The origins of Slivers in the multiverse is largely a mystery. After he entered into the service of Phyrexia, Volrath would discover Slivers on an unknown world. Intrigued by their abilities, he took several specimens with him back to Wrath for study, including the individual that would mature into the Sliver Queen. Over time, Volrath would perform various tests and experiments using the Slivers, and it's even possible that he made some modifications of his own to the species. Various attempts would be made to control the swarm, including the creation of artificial Slivers to influence the hive. The Hive Stone was likely developed around this time as another method to exert control over the hive and the Sliver Queen, though how effective this artifact was is unknown. Eventually, the hive grew in size and would come to reside within the ventilation ducts of the Furnace of Wrath. Here, the Sliver Queen's swarm acted as an additional layer of security for Volrath's stronghold, with the other residents of Wrath coming to learn just how dangerous Slivers truly were. After stealing away pieces of the legacy from the Weatherlight, Volrath handed them over to the Queen for protection, perhaps believing that the Sliver's territorial nature would prevent anyone from being able to retrieve the artifacts. Indeed, as the skyship Weatherlight was making its way through the furnace, it came under attack by the hive, with the might of the swarm overwhelming the crew. Initially, Hannah believed that the artificial Slivers were directing the swarm, reasoning that their destruction would scatter the hive. When that proved ineffective, however, she realized that the Slivers had relatively limited range when it came to sharing their abilities with one another. Thinking fast, the members of the Weatherlight crew scattered and were able to defeat the Slivers by isolating them, picking them off in small groups and allowing the Weatherlight to continue on toward the stronghold. Later, as the Weatherlight crew was preparing to leave Wrath behind, Karn, who had previously been taken captive by Volrath, returned with the stolen legacy in hand. Though he did not elaborate at the time, Karn was able to retrieve the legacy artifacts during his escape from the stronghold by appealing to the Sliver Queen herself. Karn argued that the legacy was as much a part of him as the Slivers were a part of their queen. Moved by this, the queen willingly turned over the legacy, hindering Karn no further on his escape from the stronghold. Sadly, this is where the Sliver Queen's role in the story comes to an end. During the Wrathy overlay, the Plane of Wrath was pressed into the same space as Dominaria, effectively merging the two worlds together. During this event, the Sliver Hive wound up on Urborg, with most of the Slivers, including the Queen, being transported directly into the maw of an active volcano. Most of the Hive was killed instantly. Others were trapped within the aether between worlds, and a few survivors would spread out and end up perishing during the battles of the Phyrexian invasion. Yet extinction, as it turned out, was not enough to keep the Slivers away for good. Roughly 100 years after the end of the Phyrexian invasion, the Cephalid Empress, Loan, would found the Riptide Project on an island off the coast of Otaria. The goal of this project was one of cooperation between cephalids and mankind to further the understanding of magic. Riptide wizards were known to travel far and wide, exploring the whole of Dominaria to try and learn more about the mysteries of the magical arts. During these travels, some Riptide explorers wound up on Urborg, in the very ruins of the stronghold. Here, the remains of the Slivers were discovered, and they were taken back to the Riptide laboratories for further research. In time, the wizards were able to bring the Slivers back to life, reviving the specimens they retrieved. Unfortunately, the Riptide researchers failed to understand the importance of the Sliver Queen, the central voice of the Hive, and they severely underestimated the Sliver's ability to multiply. Without a queen to control them, the Slivers rampaged at the Riptide facility, utterly annihilating the researchers. As the swarm grew in size, many managed to escape across the ocean, reaching the Otarian mainland. From here, their devastation could truly begin, and Slivers would spread to all corners of Dominaria. Mistaking the magical signal of the Marari for the call of their queen, a swarm of Slivers would descend on the city of Sanctum, where they were caught up in the same magical explosion that caused the rise of the false god, Corona. Many Slivers were destroyed in the blast, but others were instead fused together, resulting in the birth of the Sliver Overlord. Over time, Slivers would become just one more part of Dominaria, with many breeds evolving on the plane. As the temporal crisis drew near, even more variations emerged through time rifts, and the swarm became that much more dangerous. The planeswalkers Freyalise and Windgrace would make their own attempts at controlling Slivers for their own goals, but it was the shadowy Weaver King who best understood how to control them. Seizing control of the swarm, the Weaver King would cause mayhem on Dominaria and assaulted the realms of Skyshroud and Urborg. Eventually, however, the Weaver King met his end at the hands of Venser, and the Slivers of Dominaria were left once again without a central leader. Perhaps, however, the hive mind itself could be the will that drives the swarm. The Slivers are ever evolving, after all, and it's possible that new sentience could be born, shared among the hive as a whole, rather than residing in one individual. The rogue plane of Chandalar is the only other world in the multiverse where Slivers are known to exist. On this plane, a great skep can be found in the Kalunian East, within which can be found the newer, more humanoid breed of Slivers. There have been several attempts by the people of Chandalar to infiltrate and learn more about these creatures, including scouts from Thune and an attempt by Jalira and Yisan to sneak into the skep, transformed into Slivers themselves. This attempt failed, as the Hive Lord was not deceived by the pair's magic, briefly dominating their wills and forcing them to revert to human form. Surprisingly, however, the swarm did not slay the intruders. The pair was allowed to leave the hive, carrying with them a great deal of treasure, the initial goal of their infiltration. Yet, when it came time to depart for civilization, Yisan, entranced by the sounds of the Slivers, chose to stay behind, strumming his harp in tune to the song of the hive. Slivers first appeared all the way back in the Tempest block 25 years ago. They were a novelty of sorts, with each Sliver having an ability that empowered every other Sliver in play, but the true novelty was in the legendary Sliver Queen. This was the first 5-color card available in booster packs in the history of Magic, a true milestone in the game's history. New Slivers would pop up every few years since then, appearing in the Onslaught and Time Spiral blocks. As more Slivers showed up, so too did more 5-colored legendary Slivers. The Queen would be joined in time by the Overlord and the Legion. In Magic 2014, however, Slivers would receive a major shake-up. Not only were these Slivers humanoid, barely resembling the tribe players had come to love, but their abilities had changed as well. From this point on, Slivers only granted their abilities to Slivers you controlled. The following core set, Magic 2015, saw even more Slivers, as well as a new legend, the Hive Lord. Finally, another set of Sliver cards was released in the first Modern Horizons set, alongside the most recent legend, the First Sliver. With each new release, Slivers have gained access to more abilities, giving Sliver decks more tools to use when overwhelming the opposition. As far as we know, Slivers are still active on the world of Dominaria, and a return to that plane is on the horizon. Who knows? Perhaps another legendary sliver lies in our future. I first started playing Magic the Gathering back in 2014, and I almost immediately fell in love with the Sliver creature type. I've never been good at the game, not really, but something about these guys appealed to me and made me want to be good, so that I could win with them. Modern and Legacy had always been outside my price range, and Slivers really weren't playable in Standard. So I turned to the one format available to me, Elder Dragon Highlander, and I started work on my Sliver deck. It's been about 8 years now, and I still play with this deck. It's changed a lot since I started, but I still absolutely love it. Anybody who knows me knows that Sliver Queen is my absolute favorite creature in the game, one that I love to play with. Paying 2 mana for a 1/1 Sliver with no abilities doesn't seem like much at first, but it turns out that with the right support, the Queen is all but unstoppable. If you want a breakdown for how the combo works, I released a deck video a while back. A link will be in the description. With all this love I have for Slivers, I suppose I'm kind of surprised that I never did a video covering them until now. Well, here it is. What did you think? If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, share it with your friends, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. If you've got a favorite creature type, one you're passionate about, I absolutely want to hear about it in the comments section below. And of course, I want to extend a thanks to my patrons, Chelsea, Sirius Fang, Eric Jimenez, Knott, and Joshua Ward. If you want to support me directly, a link to my Patreon will be below. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.